As a kid, I was very bad with oversharing or talking to strangers, no matter how many times my parents warned me. This happened possibly when I was around 8 years old, and prime for being overly talkative. My mom had brought me to McDonald's with her friend who had a daughter so that we could play in the indoor playground after eating. It was late at night, and I don't remember why we were there so late or what we had done earlier that day, but the McDonald's was pretty much empty except for us and the staff, and one man sitting alone at a table near the play place. Of course, for whatever reason, little me, seeing a person alone, went up to him with my friend to start a conversation. I introduced my friend and started talking about my interests, where I went to school, and a lot of things I don't really remember. I don't remember him replying very much, but we eventually left him alone after he called someone on his phone and started speaking a different language. I didn't recognize it, and I don't remember it in enough detail to take a good guess now. My friend and I kept playing until the man left, and then an hour later, a big man and a young girl, roughly the same age as us, entered the McDonald's. The girl ran up to the glass, dividing the counters from the play area, and yelled my name excitedly. I went over, despite not recognizing her. She started telling me a bunch of things about myself, implying that she knew me, and that I had just forgotten. She wanted me to come outside to hang out with her. I realize now, as an adult, the things she was saying were the things I had told the man on the phone. As an oblivious, naive child, I was ready to go with her when my mom dragged me out the other exit to our car. She was clearly terrified and stressed, and I was confused, demanding why she wouldn't let me play with the other girl. My mom wouldn't answer, and she tore out of the parking lot. Just then, the man and the little girl got in their own car, and from what we could see as we left, they began following us. My mom went down several different roads away from our house until we couldn't see them anymore. I was in serious trouble when I got home, and she explained to me this was most likely a kidnapping scheme, and that I really needed to stop telling random strangers so much information about myself. I didn't understand how a little girl my age could be involved with kidnapping another kid. Not to mention, I didn't understand the motivation of kidnapping to begin with. Now that I get it, this story would have a truly horrifying end for my friend and I if it wasn't for my mom. I still worry about that little girl and what kind of life she must have had. I once knew a guy who owned an Italian restaurant in Connecticut. I didn't know him well, but I had met him a few times. I'll call him Giovanni. One of my friends and coworkers had gotten to know him, and he suggested we go to Giovanni's restaurant for some pizza. We expected it wouldn't be open, but my friend called anyway. Surprisingly enough, Giovanni answered and invited us in. They'd closed the restaurant to customers, but the ovens were still hot, and it wasn't hard for the last chef to whip up a few things for us. We went to the back office while waiting for our food, and Giovanni asks, "Want to see something you'll never forget?" He opens his desk drawer, reaches in, and pulls out a .44 Magnum revolver. I'd seen handguns in person before, but this thing was massive. The way he was holding it, I half expected he was just going to fire the damn gun while we all stood in the office. But no. He swivels and looks at me, and then, before I could even think about anything, his arm is up and the barrel of the gun is kissing my forehead. Bet you never had a gun pointed at your head before. Please, don't. He pulled the trigger. I can't describe the shock that went through my body. It's like I went totally cold, chills rushing through my nerves up and down my back. There was no bullet in the chamber. He was right about one thing. I never forgot it. If you think what he did up to that point was bad, he then pressed a release button on the gun, and the cylinder pops out. Not only were there bullets in the gun, he'd left just one chamber empty. If he had slipped up, I would have gotten a bullet through my brain. Just knowing that he did that, and how close I came to being dead, scared the living crap out of me. Needless to say, I never saw him again, and I never went back to that restaurant. This happened nearly 30 years ago in 1997. I enjoy the outdoors, and sometimes I like to take long walks in the afternoon on the hiking trails near my house. One evening, I was walking on a trail and wound up coming to a house where a little girl was playing in the front yard with her toys. It was a pretty big yard, and she was probably 150 feet from the front door of her house. I waved and kept on walking when she screamed as loud as she could, "Dad, there's somebody in our yard!" Before I could say anything, this guy smashes open his screen door, running full tilt at me while holding a baseball bat and screaming at the top of his lungs. I was almost dumbstruck by his response time, not to mention the response itself. I took off on a dead run while he kept screaming at me to come back over and over again, along with a number of other choice words. It sounds like a scene from a short horror film, but that's exactly how it was. I was being chased through the woods by a stranger with a bat. This was something that was actually happening, and he seemed hell-bent on caving my face in. The branches cut me up all over the place, but I was so scared I didn't even care. Compared with the thought of being bludgeoned to death, the nicks and cuts all over were nothing to me. I didn't dare look back over my shoulder to see if he was gaining. I came up to a bush and noticed the sound of rushing water. Not knowing if he was possibly right behind me or very close, I jumped through the bush to find cover in the leaves. The ground gave out on the other side of the bush into a steep riverbank, but turning back wasn't a viable option. I jumped into the water, held my breath, and let myself sink to the bottom. I then let the current of the river take me as far as I could until I needed another breath of air. When I came up, I took some time to try and discern the sound of the rushing water from the surrounding forest. I couldn't see him anymore or hear any yelling, ripping, or tearing throughout the woods. I crossed the river back to the side I had been on and hid in the woods for several hours until it got dark. Once night had fallen, I emerged from the bush I had been hiding in and listened again. I took a bet that I had lost him in the woods and started walking home, all the while worried that he was still out there somewhere. I've never seen or heard of the man since, and I've never been back to that trail or to those woods. When I was about 14, I walked down to the cemetery that was a few streets over from my neighborhood to visit my uncle's grave. He and I were very close, and I was missing him a lot that day. I get down there, and there's a small group of people finishing up a funeral. I was walking around trying to find his grave, but having a hard time because his stone is flat. So I kind of had to move aside some of the weeds and grass on the stones in the section he was buried in to try to see if they had his name on them. The people who were doing the funeral finished up after 10 minutes, and then it was just me in the cemetery. I was still looking around for my uncle's gravesite when I see a big truck stopped at the top of the hill. I figured it was just somebody else there to visit their loved ones, so I didn't think too much of it. Still, I couldn't help feeling a little wary because now I was alone. I look around for another 10 minutes, silently cursing my family for going with a flat stone instead of one that was more easy to recognize. I looked back to where the truck was, and that's when it started coming down the hill towards me. I never heard any sound of doors closing or saw anyone get in or out of the truck. I still can't explain it to this day, but as that truck came down towards me, I became overwhelmed with this feeling of primal fear. I decided to leave and headed down the path to get back to the entrance. Now, the way the cemetery is laid out, there are 3 paths all leading down to the entrance. In the corner of my eye, I noticed that the truck was creeping slowly behind me on the path parallel to mine. The windows were tinted and I couldn't see who was driving, but I knew it wasn't one of the cemetery workers because all of their vehicles were white and this one was black. I started walking faster, praying to my uncle to keep me safe. The truck followed me down, keeping pace with me the entire time. I couldn't see the person driving, but I just had this sick feeling in my stomach that they were watching me. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 to 10 minutes, I get to the entrance and break into a run. The truck, which has only been matching my walking speed, suddenly speeds up. When I finally started seeing houses coming up on the side of the road, the person in the truck stopped and did a U-turn and headed back down into the cemetery. I finally made it home, and the sick feeling in my stomach went away. I put the incident in the back of my mind until a week later when I see an article in our local paper. Apparently, a few days after my run-in with the truck, a 12-year-old girl was walking around her neighborhood, which wasn't too far from where the cemetery is. Someone in a black-colored truck with tinted windows started following her around and only sped off when she ran to nearby houses, banging on the doors and screaming for help until someone finally answered their door and let her in. She didn't recognize the truck as belonging to anyone that she knew or any of her neighbors. The person that opened their door called the cops so that other parents of children knew to be on alert. Looking back as an adult, I realize I probably should have said something. I'm just glad nothing happened to me or that other girl. I don't know for sure what the person in that truck was doing in the cemetery. I don't know what might or might not have happened had I not noticed it when I did, but I will never forget that feeling of pure panic that suddenly overtook me in that moment. I have never experienced anything like it, and I hope that I never do. I really feel like my uncle was there with me that day. I know it's more than likely that the reason I couldn't find his gravesite is because that cemetery is so damn big, but I like to think that maybe he stayed hidden so that I would notice that truck. I absolutely believe that our deceased loved ones, especially the ones we were closest to, are never really as far away as we think. People can tell me it's just my brain trying to process grief and say that it's nonsense, but it's comforting to think about in that way. Back in my younger days, when I was still living with roommates, I was looking to move, and I was about to leave to see a place in the perfect location. It had a good price and 2 seemingly professional male roomies. At the last minute, my boyfriend suggests that he goes along because the place is nearby and they'll have to meet him at some point anyway. We get there, and I introduce myself, and the one roommate seems a little taken aback at the fact that I have someone with me. I suppose it could be seen as unusual to bring your boyfriend, but I figured, oh well, the damage is already done. If they don't want me to be their roommate simply because he's there, I can't do anything about it now. Let's just see the place. The apartment was huge. We're both suitably impressed until we turn the corner of the living room. Then we see it. A 2-camera setup with a light pointed at the couch. There's a guy sitting on the couch that is introduced as the other roommate. He immediately snaps into a sitting position and gives my boyfriend the same weird look. I now realize the look they were giving was disappointment. I shoot my boyfriend a very quick look of understanding, but we silently decide to continue with the tour so as not to escalate the situation. I casually joke that it's nice that they have a camera so I can videotape myself for my auditions. They both laugh a little too hard for how funny the joke was, and say, yes, that's what it was for. He brings us over to my room, and it's literally a broom closet. You wouldn't even be able to fit a single-sized bed in there. It is now blatantly obvious that there was never a room for rent in the first place. I take this opportunity to get out of there by saying, oh well, that's too bad. I have a queen bed and I won't be able to fit. Thanks for your time. My boyfriend and I get out to the street and walk around the corner without saying a word. When we finally look at each other, it's in this stunned silence. He just hugged me really tight for a long time, and we went for a walk in the park.